All right, thanks for the intro, James. But I guess I'm Eric Connor. I work on product research at Gnosis. I also run a website called ETHub, which is an open source information website. So we have documentation for kind of anybody to learn about Ethereum, but mainly focus on people that haven't heard about it before. We have a podcast called Into the Ether, and we have a newsletter called ETHub Weekly that goes out each week. So kind of been in the space for a few years and just recently joined Gnosis 2 years ago. Today, we're going to talk about smart contract wallets and why I think where we're at right now with accounts and how people manage their wallets and accounts is not where we're going to be in a couple of years, potentially 1 to 2 years. I think from now, smart contract wallets are going to be the most used technically DApp on Ethereum, and why it's important. So at Gnosis, we have a product called Gnosis Safe, which is the first kind of stab at a smart contract wallet. So I'll kind of be integrating that into this talk as well. I figured we should start with a meme. Why not, right? Back to the Future, obviously, if you haven't seen that, you should probably leave right now, I guess, and go see it. But seed phrases, where we're going, you won't need seed phrases. So to me, like when I help onboard someone to Ethereum, just like MetaMask is a bit of an issue for some people, the point where I lose most people is explaining a seed phrase to them. Saying, if you lose this, you lose all of your money, right? That's just not a good message for people. And explaining like how this seed phrase can restore their wallet for them, and if someone else gets this seed phrase, they can hack them. Like that we're never going to get to mainstream adoption if we have that. But first, let's talk about where we are today. So, I'm sure I think I have like 15 mobile wallets installed on my phone. Like, it's just crazy how many there are, and they all have great features. They've all kind of found their little niche, but they all have the same management of wallets. So it's all an externally owned account that's backed up by a private key, which you can restore with your seed phrase, which I was talking about. So that's where we are today, or even worse, people are storing their funds on exchange. So if you have your funds on exchange, go take those off right now, because it's never a good security measure. But this is the state of where we are today. I mean, 99% of the space either stores their funds on an exchange or in an externally owned account. Over the last few years, since the start of Ethereum, and especially since mid 2017, we've seen an explosion in both accounts that are on Ethereum and funds that are held on Ethereum. So we're up to 70 million accounts. This is growing anywhere between like 50,000 to 100,000 a day, which is pretty crazy. And if you kind of total up the value of all the ETH on the network and all the ERC20s, you're looking at about $40 billion in value. So you have all of this value sitting in these wallets, hopefully not on exchanges, but if they're off exchanges, in these wallets, where if the seed was compromised or you lost the seed, it's all gone, right? So we ran a survey recently at Gnosis. I figured people would just find this interesting. And obviously, we were spreading this in like Discord and Telegram channels where people are familiar with Ethereum. So these are kind of like your Ethereum power users. But this just kind of gives you a view today, like how people are using Ethereum and their wallets. So 67% of the respondents actually made a transaction weekly or more often than that, which I found pretty interesting. The most popular wallet solution is obviously MetaMask. So 77% of the respondents were using that. What's interesting is only with a confidence level of 6 out of 10, people felt comfortable actually storing their funds on MetaMask. 82% of these people own a hardware wallet, and they felt a lot more comfortable storing their funds there. And 85% actually had a mobile wallet installed, but half of those people didn't feel comfortable storing $30 or more. So that's a bit of a problem, right? Like, how are we ever going to get people to be using Ethereum on the go and more often if they don't even feel comfortable carrying it around in their wallet? I mean, pretty much every interaction we see in the real world these days is done on mobile, right? Like mobile banking is taking over. People trade their stocks on mobile, pretty much anything in the finance world. And of course, like gaming and messaging, it's all on mobile. So we need to get to where people feel comfortable carrying their crypto around in their pocket. We're not going to have people carrying around their laptops and plugging their hardware wallets in and using Ethereum, right? It's just not going to be the case. So there's two types of accounts on Ethereum. So the one I've been focusing on most so far are externally owned accounts. You kind of have your notch, your balance, your code hash, and your storage root. And there's just a key that controls these, right? And that's where we are today. I'm going to keep talking about that a little bit. But there's also another type, which is a contract account. And all of these, like your balance, all of this is controlled by code, not just this single seed phrase. So let's start with externally owned accounts. Obviously, as I've been saying, this is the most popular option to date. It's what people are just used to. So usually if someone gets like onboarded into a new experience, they're going to just be comfortable with the first thing that they used. And most of the wallets are using this. But like I've said, if the seed's lost, everything's gone, which is a problem. This is basically my experience with every wallet I sign up for. We're never going to become the kind of go-to financial system of the future or gaming system of the future or whatever it might be if the second step of your onboarding, you're telling people that if they lose this phrase, they've lost everything, right? So I think this is a huge facepalm and a big problem. But the good news is we can actually fix this. The other thing is people feel comfortable with hardware wallets, right? Now, this is still an externally owned account, but it's just that your phrase is never exposed to the public, right? So it's air-gapped. Again, though, this is still not a smart contract wallet solution. People feel very comfortable here. Like I said, 90% of the respondents to the survey have a hardware wallet. Still, if you don't have a good backup plan, everything's gone. My biggest issue with this is it just simply doesn't scale, right? A little bit different than what we're talking about at this conference as far as scaling goes, but we're never going to have people carrying around $70 hardware wallets with them and having to plug them into a computer or syncing it with your phone to make a transaction. It's just not, we're never going to get mainstream with that. So where are we at today with the current state of wallets? So I kind of like to look at this on a spectrum of safe to not safe and inconvenient to highly convenient. So kind of over on the left, we have the hardware wallets, what we talked about. They're obviously the most safe, but they're not very convenient. And then we have kind of our mobile and desktop apps, which are more convenient, not as safe. And then obviously kind of storing funds on centralized exchanges. How do we get up here into this sweet spot, right, of safe and highly convenient? So I'm sure some people here know of Alex van de Sande. He's a very kind of OG Ethereum developer, was on some of the first teams and worked on the Mist wallet. I kind of like this famous, I guess, screenshot to me, or at least to us at Gnosis, is let's stop using private keys to hold funds and instead let's store them in contracts and sign messages. So it would be amazing if we had a platform to actually do this, write smart contracts. So that's the good news, right? We can solve this with Ethereum. So this is kind of my thoughts on things, is mainstream users really want a banking-like experience where they aren't constantly fearful of losing all their money. So, you know, your bank, your credit card has guarantees, right? If your credit card, if you drop it on the street and someone picks it up and goes buy coffee at Starbucks, that your credit card company is going to give you those funds back. That kind of guarantee doesn't exist on Ethereum right now. If your bank account at Chase is hacked and someone transfers money out, they're going to track down your money and give it back to you. So we need these kind of guarantees that users want on Ethereum to make this go more mainstream. So that's where this here. So we've been talking about externally owned accounts so far. Now we're going to talk about contract accounts. So what can smart contract wallets enable? And this is where this, at least to me, hopefully to some of you too, starts to get really exciting. So the first and most important, I'm going to walk through each of these, is social recovery. So you have different ways to recover your funds and back up your funds other than just your seed phrase. Two-factor authentication for transactions, very interesting things you can do with gas meta transactions. You can set transfer limits. The possibilities here are pretty endless. I've put the Gnosis Safe logo next to, so Gnosis Safe, by the way, is on iOS and Android. You can go download it now. The logo next to those features means we have that already in Gnosis Safe, and the other two on this list are currently in research and development. So social recovery, this is definitely the most interesting. So this is seedless recovery of your funds. And really you could hide the seed phrase completely for the user. So you can envision it as picking your two best friends or your mom and dad, or your one best friend and your mom and dad, or you could have your Ledger hardware wallet and your mom and dad. These are your backup recovery options. So when you set up your wallet, you assign these people as your backups. Now, whenever you well, I'll get into it, but you could also provide a service. So most people, I'm sure a lot of people in this room wouldn't feel comfortable having a centralized service that could restore your funds for you, but actually most people outside of this building would feel comfortable with that, right? They're comfortable keeping their funds in a bank. They would be okay with like a secondary service that could restore their funds for them if they lost them. So the key here, though, is when you assign these backups, they don't actually have control of your wallet. They just have certain permissions to your contract that allows them to trigger a recovery process. So how does this work? So you set up the Gnosis safe, and today in most wallets you would be done there, right? You set it up, it gives you the seed phrase, and you're done. Well, you can go in and set up social recovery. So you pick 3 of your favorite people, and they're now your backups. And now you kind of continue on in the process, and you can use your wallet as is. Now imagine you drop your phone down the toilet, whatever it might be, and all of a sudden you didn't have a backup plan in place, your house burned down, you lost your private key, whatever it might be. You can now re-download the app, and you can trigger the recovery process. So you say, yes, I had this account, I lost it, please send a signal or a transaction to my backup options, and ask them to verify and recover my wallet for me. So these users would be notified, and in the app, they would say, yep, this is legit. I just talked to Eric. He said he lost his funds, and they say they approve it. Now, you could do 3 out of 3. You could do 2 out of 3 signatures, whatever it might be. Once they do that, the private key is replaced in your wallet. It's restored into your current safe, and you get access to your funds. So think about the potential here, right? Like, people feel comfortable trusting others. If you don't feel comfortable trusting others, you could use your hardware wallet as a backup. So you could, say this happened and you lost your wallet, you could trigger the recovery, you could go to your hardware wallet, sign a transaction, and it would recover your funds for you. So the possibilities here are pretty endless. It doesn't just have to be people. One other thing that I find exciting here is you don't actually even have to have the social recovery aspect. You could do what's called a time recovery. So you could say, if my wallet doesn't make a transaction in 2 years, right, it kicks off the same recovery process. So if you lost access and you hadn't set up backup options, you set up an account that in 2 years, if there's no transactions, it could go on. Now, of course, this is a little dangerous because if you actually just took a 2-year vacation or whatever it might be, but the thought is obviously you're still going to have control to the wallet at the end of things. So again, it doesn't have to be a social recovery mechanism. It could be a time thing. And this is very interesting. I mean, even, people are dying and they don't have backup plans or like wills for their crypto. This is a very interesting way to do that. So, and this is just all made possible because we're doing the wallet inside of a smart contract, which allows you to program really anything that you want. So that's the first. So I find that to be the most interesting for us at Gnosis. It's in R&D, I would put it, but should be coming out pretty soon. The next is two-factor authentication, which we have in the Gnosis safe already. So how this works on setup is you sync, even though apparently people hate browser extensions, Max, but you install the Gnosis Safe browser extension. There's other options coming soon, but on the setup process, you scan your browser. Your safe now knows about your browser, and anytime you make a transaction, it's going to ask you to confirm it on your browser. So, I mean, this can prevent a lot of things, right? It can prevent fraud. I've personally missent some transactions in the past. Maybe I type in too much Ether to send, or I type the wrong address. This kind of gives you like a second peace of mind. And there's a lot more here, but it can go beyond browser. So you could use your hardware wallet or like a status key card in the future for this. You could integrate it into password managers where, it's automatically managing your two-factor auth for you and you just type it in. So this is a pretty cool feature that it enables as well. This is how it works in the safe, just a little visual, but you trigger the transaction in the safe, it pops up on your browser extension and says, are you sure? And then it won't go through until you do that. So next up is really cool, and this is a unique feature right now to the safe, is gas meta transactions. So what this allows you to do is we actually have a gas relayer, which allows users to send gas fees in any token besides ETH. So every transaction on Ethereum requires a little bit of ETH to pay gas, to pay a miner. So we have a relay service set up, which I'll show here, but basically the user can sign the transaction, they transfer ERC20 tokens, so say DAI, if they want to use DAI DAI for a gas payment, they transfer it to this relay service. The relay service is actually paying gas and ETH to the miner still in the background, but they're getting paid in the token instead. So on the safe, you have the ability to pay gas. Obviously, the default's ETH, but you can play it in DAI, and I believe we have 7 or 8 tokens on there total. But pretty cool feature. This would allow you to like have a DAI only wallet. So I personally had a wallet where, you know, maybe I went to a conference and I just had DAI on it and didn't send Ether to, and then when I went to send it, you know, there was no ETH to pay the transaction fee, and it's kind of a hassle. So pretty cool little feature here. Next up, and I think this one's really nice, and this is a fraud prevention and kind of gives you that similar banking experience that people are used to, are large transfer limits. So you could tell the contract, hey, the max I want to be able to send at one time is $100, or let's use ETH, so 10 ETH. So the contract now knows this. If you go to send a transaction over that amount, it'll stop it for a set amount of time, say like 24 to 48 hours. And if someone had got access to my phone and was trying to send all my Ether off of it, I would have time to go in and cancel this transaction, right? You can create whitelists that don't have limits, so the Ether would go through to these. Maybe you always send money to an exchange or something. You could whitelist that address, or if you wanted to go through, you could signal to your backups, and they could allow the transaction to go through. But again, just this is in my opinion what people want when they use a wallet or they transact on their financial system. They don't want the ability, the fear in the back of their head that they could lose money at any time. And smart contract wallets will allow us to, you know, the possibilities are really endless, but these are kind of the core ones. So smart contract wallets. Second meme, by the way. So I guess I get a lot of questions. I've been talking a lot about smart contract wallets the last few months now, just with people online or through Twitter or at meetups or whatever. And I mean, one of the most common questions is like, why? This seems obvious, like the features are a lot more powerful. It introduces security and fraud prevention and all this great stuff. And so why haven't we seen more adoption yet? My answer to that would be the options are still relatively new. So Gnosis Safe has been out about a year now, but we're still, you know, in the research and development on the social recovery side. Argent's out. They're another smart contract wallet provider. They take a little bit different approach to us on like features and how they do the UI and stuff. But all these apps are pretty new. But it seems like I was just talking to the token card team the other day. They're allowing you to spend your crypto on a Visa card. They're using a smart contract wallet to manage users' funds. So we're starting to see this more and more pop up. I think it's just going to take time. And one of the biggest is, I think, the "it won't happen to me" syndrome. That's a syndrome I just made up for this. But people think that a hack or losing their seed phrase is just never going to happen to them until it does, right? So you see that a lot with exchange hacks. People are, oh, Coinbase could never get hacked. Well, someday it might get hacked, right? Like, you just never know until you're the one that had funds on those exchanges. And then the most obvious one is probably just fears over security of the smart contract wallets. So now, obviously, your funds aren't backed up by a seed phrase, but they're inside of a smart contract wallet. So in doing that, brings code risk. So obviously the famous parity multi-sig hack, where a lot of Ether was lost to a vulnerability in the parity multi-sig wallet code. So I think we just going to have to give it time and kind of get over this fear of contract risk. So the Gnosis Safe has been formally verified, so we've gone through extensive audits. We have a lot of our own funds in there to prove that we have trust in it. Numbers are growing, and I think trust will come with time. But I think we're going to be back to this conference in a year or 2 years, and I think most people are going to be using smart contract wallets at that point over traditional externally owned accounts today. Just one more note I wanted to say, because I'm a huge fan of Wallet Connect, which is a cool open source project from Pedro Gromes. But Gnosis Safe is adding this to our wallet at the end of the month. So basically now you're going to be able to interact with web dApps through Gnosis Safe. So what happens is, say you go to the Maker CDP dashboard, they would have an option for Wallet Connect. You click it. It opens up a QR code. From Gnosis Safe, you scan that QR code, and now your wallet is linked to your browser, so you actually don't have to use MetaMask at all anymore for that, and you sign the transactions right on your phone. So, I think this is I'm a big fan of Wallet Connect in general, and I think this is going to be the way forward. So if you start mixing security on mobile wallets using smart contracts with things like Wallet Connect, now you can truly have your crypto on your phone, on the go, and you don't have to worry about security or launching your browser to pull up MetaMask. Yeah, so that's it. So any questions?
Will state rent affect this in any way, shape, or form?
To be honest, we haven't really gone there just because the effort seems still pretty far away, so we haven't done too much research on it. Theoretically, it would because it's going to impact any smart contract, but it seems to be we're moving more in the direction of stateless clients now than like the state rent idea, so haven't really gone there yet, to be honest. Yeah. All right, cool. Thanks for listening.